I still remember the day I stumbled upon that Craigslist ad. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, and I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment, desperately searching for a job. The hum of my laptop and the patter of raindrops against the window were the only sounds that filled the room. I had just graduated from college with a degree in English, and the job market was brutal. I needed work, any work, to start paying off my mounting student loans. Scrolling through endless job postings, my eyes landed on an ad that seemed promising. Personal assistant needed $25 per hour, flexible hours. The pay was decent, and the hours would allow me to continue my job hunt if needed. The description was brief but enticing. Seeking a reliable and organized individual to assist with daily tasks must be detail-oriented and trustworthy. Previous experience preferred but not required. Sounded perfect. I clicked on the ad and quickly typed out an email expressing my interest, attaching my resume. To my surprise, I received a reply within the hour. The email was from a man named Mr. Martin, who seemed eager to meet me. The following day, I found myself driving to the address Mr. Martin had provided. It was a little out of town, in a more rural area than I was used to. The drive was scenic, with winding roads flanked by dense woods. As I drove deeper into the countryside, the houses became fewer and farther between. The rain from the previous day had left a mist lingering in the air, adding an eerie atmosphere to the journey. Finally, I arrived at a large old house nestled among the trees. It looked like it had been there for centuries, with ivy climbing up the stone walls and large, gnarled trees casting long shadows over the property. I parked my car and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. I approached the front door, which was heavy and wooden, with an ornate brass knocker. I lifted it and let it fall, the sound echoing through the stillness. Moments later, the door creaked open, and a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair and piercing blue eyes greeted me. "You must be Hazel," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Mr. Martin. Please come in." The inside of the house was just as old and grand as the exterior. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, and antique furniture filled the rooms. Mr. Martin led me to a cozy sitting room where a fire crackled in the fireplace. The warmth was welcoming, but there was an underlying chill in the air that I couldn't quite shake. We sat down, and he began to ask me questions about my experience, my skills, and why I was interested in the position. His questions started off normal enough, but as the interview went on, they grew increasingly personal. "Do you live alone?" he asked, his eyes boring into mine. "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have any close family or friends nearby?" I hesitated, feeling a pang of unease. "No, my family lives out of state, and I don't know many people around here yet." Mr. Martin's smile widened, and he leaned back in his chair. "Well, it sounds like you're a perfect fit for the job. When can you start?" Despite my reservations, the offer was too good to pass up. I started the following Monday. My tasks were simple at first: organizing files, answering emails, and running errands. Mr. Martin was polite and friendly, but there was something off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He was always watching me, his gaze lingering a bit too long, making me feel like a specimen under a microscope. One day, he asked me to clean out the attic. It was a mundane task, and I was grateful for the break from his constant presence. The attic was dusty and cluttered, filled with boxes of forgotten belongings. As I sorted through the mess, I came across a box labeled "Personal." Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside, I found photographs, hundreds of them. They were all of young women, some smiling, some looking startled, all taken in various parts of the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that many of them had been taken without the women knowing. Some of the faces were familiar. I had seen them in missing persons reports on the news. A wave of panic washed over me. I felt sick to my stomach. I needed to get out of there, but as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mr. Martin appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge that sent shivers down my spine. I was just cleaning," I stammered, trying to hide the photos behind my back. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be snooping around in things that don't concern you, Hazel." My mind raced, searching for an excuse to leave. I just remembered, I have an appointment. I need to go. Mr. Martin blocked my path, his smile gone. You're not going anywhere. Desperation gave me strength. I pushed past him and ran down the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I reached the front door, but it was locked. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking, and finally managed to open it. I dashed outside, sprinting to my car. Mr. Martin was right behind me, shouting threats that I couldn't make out over the sound of my own panicked breaths. I jumped into my car and locked the doors, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life and I sped down the driveway, not daring to look back. As I drove away, I called the police, my hands trembling. I explained everything, my voice shaking with fear. They promised to send someone to investigate. I didn't stop driving until I was back in the safety of my apartment, locking the doors and windows, my mind racing with what I had just experienced. The police later informed me that Mr. Martin was a suspect in several disappearances. They found hidden cameras throughout his house and enough evidence to arrest him. I was lucky to have escaped, but the faces of those women in the photos haunted me. I couldn't help but think about what might have happened if I hadn't found that box. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak and shadow in my apartment made my heart race. The knowledge that I had been so close to danger, so oblivious, left me constantly on edge. Even in the safety of my home, the fear lingered, a dark cloud over my everyday life. To this day, I still don't know the full extent of Mr. Martin's crimes. How many women had he lured with his seemingly innocent job offers? How many never made it out? The unanswered questions gnaw at me, a reminder of the evil that can hide behind a friendly smile and a promising opportunity. Whenever I see a Craigslist ad now, I can't help but think of Mr. Martin and the horror that lurked behind his charming facade. I warn others to be cautious, to trust their instincts, and to never take safety for granted. It's a small comfort to know that sharing my story might save someone else from a similar fate. The internet can be a useful tool, but it can also be a gateway to nightmares. Always exercise caution, trust your instincts, and remember, not everything is as it seems. Finding the perfect couch for our new apartment wasn't as easy as we thought. My boyfriend Jack and I had just moved in together and were on a tight budget. We spent weeks browsing furniture stores and online marketplaces, but everything was either too expensive or just not right. That's when I stumbled upon a Craigslist ad that seemed like a godsend. Free couch, good condition, must pick up. The photos showed a large plush couch in a rich, deep blue. It looked comfortable, and best of all, it was free. The only catch was that we had to pick it up ourselves from a house about an hour's drive away. I showed Jack the ad and we decided to go for it. We contacted the seller, an older man named Mr. Adams, who seemed friendly enough over the phone. He gave us the address and told us to come by that evening. As we drove out of the city and into the countryside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the winding roads. The houses became sparser and soon we were surrounded by dense woods. Felt like we were driving into another world. The GPS led us to a narrow gravel driveway that snaked through the trees, eventually opening up to a clearing where a large old house stood. The house was a bit run down, with peeling paint and overgrown bushes, but it had a certain charm. We parked the car and walked up to the front door, which was slightly ajar. I knocked, and the door creaked open further. "Hello," I called out. "Mr. Adams?" A moment later, a man appeared from around the corner, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his late 50s, with a friendly smile and a slight hunch in his posture. "You must be here for the couch," he said. "Come on in, it's just in the basement." Jack and I exchanged a glance, but followed him inside. The house was filled with the scent of old wood and dust. It was cluttered with antique furniture and knickknacks, giving it a cozy, if slightly eerie, feel. Mr. Adams led us to a narrow staircase that descended into the basement. The basement was dimly lit, and the air was musty. In the center of the room, the couch sat as promised. It looked just like the photos, a bit worn but still in good condition. We thanked Mr. Adams and started to lift the couch, struggling to maneuver it through the narrow basement door. As we shifted the cushions to get a better grip, I noticed something odd. There was a bulge under one of the cushions, as if something was hidden underneath. Curiosity got the better of me and I lifted the cushion. Beneath the cushion was a small wooden box. It was old and intricately carved, with a brass latch. I glanced at Jack, who was equally puzzled. "Do you think we should open it?" I whispered. Before Jack could respond, Mr. Adams stepped forward, his face suddenly stern. "That's none of your concern," he said sharply, snatching the box from my hands. "Just take the couch and go." His sudden change in demeanor was unsettling. We hurriedly carried the couch up the stairs and loaded it into our car, all the while feeling Mr. Adams' eyes on us. We thanked him again, but he didn't respond, just stood there watching as we drove away. Back at our apartment, we set up the couch and tried to relax. We laughed about our strange encounter, chalking it up to Mr. Adams being a bit eccentric. We ordered pizza and settled in for a movie night, feeling a bit more at ease. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind outside made me jump. Jack tried to reassure me, but I could tell he was on edge too. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. We would come home to find the couch cushions moved, as if someone had been searching through them. Items from our living room began to disappear, only to reappear in odd places. At first, we thought we were just being forgetful, but the incidents became too frequent to ignore. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The whispers were faint but distinct, coming from the living room. My heart pounded as I nudged Jack awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. He listened for a moment and then nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We crept out of bed and down the hallway, the whispers growing louder. As we approached the living room, the temperature seemed to drop, and a cold chill enveloped us. The living room was dark, save for the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. The whispers stopped as we entered the room, and the silence was deafening. We stood there, holding our breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow flitted across the room, disappearing behind the couch. I grabbed Jack's arm, and we slowly approached the couch, our fear mounting with each step. We found nothing behind the couch, but the sense of unease lingered. We decided to move the couch to see if there was anything underneath. As we lifted it, a small, tattered notebook fell out from beneath the frame. I picked it up and opened it, revealing pages filled with scrawled handwriting. The entries were disturbing. They detailed the lives of previous owners of the couch, all of whom had experienced strange occurrences and unexplainable phenomena. The final entry was from Mr. Adams himself, describing how he had found the couch in an abandoned house and the horrors that had plagued him since. Jack and I exchanged horrified looks. We realized that whatever was happening, it wasn't just our imagination. The couch was somehow connected to these events, and we needed to get rid of it. We decided to return the couch to Mr. Adams, hoping that it would end the disturbances. We loaded the couch into our car and drove back to the house. It was late at night, and the drive felt longer and more ominous than before. When we arrived, the house was dark, and the air was thick with tension. We knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Desperate, we left the couch on the porch with a note explaining our decision. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in the window watching us. The strange occurrences stopped after we got rid of the couch, but the fear and anxiety lingered. I couldn't help but wonder about the other owners and what had happened to them. The lack of clear answers left a lingering sense of dread. I share this story to warn others. Be cautious of what you bring into your home. Sometimes, a seemingly innocent item can carry a dark history and a persistent threat. Trust your instincts, and if something feels off, don't ignore it. After a messy breakup and a job offer I couldn't refuse, I found myself packing my life into a couple of suitcases and heading to a place where I knew no one. The excitement of new beginnings was mixed with the anxiety of the unknown. I needed a place to live and quickly turned to CRAIGSLIST. Scrolling through the listings, I came across an ad that seemed perfect. It wanted a spacious house in a quiet suburb. The rent was reasonable, the house looked beautiful in the photos, and the ad boasted a friendly and laid-back environment. The current tenant, Greg, had written a warm description that made me feel at ease. He described himself as a young professional, easygoing, and respectful of privacy. I decided to give it a shot and sent an email expressing my interest. Greg replied promptly, and we arranged a time for me to come by and see the place. The house was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with trees and well-kept lawns. As I drove up to the address, the sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over everything. The house itself was charming, with a large porch and an inviting front yard. Greg greeted me at the door with a friendly smile. He was in his early 30s, tall and lanky, with a mop of curly brown hair and an air of easy confidence. The interior of the house was just as pleasant as the exterior, with spacious rooms and tasteful decor. We chatted for a while, and he showed me the room I would be renting. It was cozy, with a large window that overlooked the backyard. Everything seemed perfect. We agreed that I would move in the following week. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I drove back to my temporary accommodation. Finally, things were falling into place. The first few days after moving in were great. Greg was friendly and respectful, giving me space to settle in. We would occasionally chat in the evenings, sharing stories about our lives over dinner. One night, we even watched a movie together in the living room. It felt good to have some companionship in a new city, but then things started to change. It began with small, almost imperceptible disturbances. I would come home to find my belongings slightly out of place. First, I thought I was just being paranoid. Then I started noticing things that were harder to dismiss. My room would be locked when I had left it unlocked, and items would go missing, only to reappear in different places. I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself that it was just the stress of the move and my new job getting to me. But the unease grew, gnawing at me, making it hard to focus on anything else. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted and ready to collapse into bed. As I walked down the hallway to my room, I noticed a faint light coming from under Greg's door. It was unusual, as he usually went to bed early. I couldn't resist my curiosity, and I quietly approached his door, listening. I could hear muffled voices like a conversation, but only one voice was Greg's. The other was unfamiliar, mechanical, like it was coming from a recording. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was he doing in there? The next morning, Greg was cheerful as ever, making pancakes in the kitchen. I forced a smile and tried to shake off the lingering discomfort. He invited me to join him for breakfast, and we chatted about mundane things. Work, the weather, weekend plans. It was almost enough to make me forget the strange noises from the night before. But then, just as I was starting to relax, Greg mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He asked if I had slept well, adding with a chuckle, "I thought I heard you up late last night." The way he said it with that too friendly smile made my skin crawl. The disturbances continued, growing more unsettling. I would hear footsteps outside my door at night, the soft creak of floorboards as if someone was standing just outside, listening. One night, I woke up to find Greg standing in my doorway, just staring at me. I sat up, heart pounding, and he quickly apologized, claiming he thought he heard a noise and wanted to check on me. I tried to believe him, but the fear was becoming too hard to ignore. I started locking my door at night and keeping my phone within reach. My dreams were plagued with images of Greg watching me, his eyes following my every move. The once cozy house now felt like a prison, and I was trapped with a man I was beginning to fear more each day. One particularly rainy night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what Greg was up to. After he went to bed, I quietly crept down the hallway and gently pushed his door open. The room was dark, but I could see the faint glow of his computer screen. He was asleep, breathing softly, completely unaware of my presence. I stepped inside and saw that his computer was still on. On the screen was a folder labeled Roommates. My hands shook as I clicked on it. Inside were countless videos and photos, all of me. There were recordings from hidden cameras in my room, the bathroom, and other areas of the house. The most recent video was from that very night, showing me sleeping in my bed. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt like I might be sick. I grabbed a USB drive from my bedroom and quickly copied as many files as I could, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to get out of there. I backed out of the room, careful not to wake Greg, and made my way to my car. As I drove away, the rain poured down, blurring my vision and amplifying my panic. I went straight to the police and handed over the evidence. They assured me they would investigate, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in the safety of my car. I found a hotel for the night, unable to return to the house. The next day, the police contacted me. They had arrested Greg and found more hidden cameras throughout the house, along with recordings of previous tenants. The realization that I wasn't the first, that others had lived through this nightmare, made my stomach turn. I had been lucky to escape when I did. I moved out of the house immediately, finding a new place with a trustworthy roommate I met through mutual friends. The experience left me shaken and paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. I couldn't believe how close I had come to becoming another victim. Always conduct thorough background checks and trust your instincts. The internet can hide the most sinister intentions behind a friendly smile and a charming ad. Babysitting was supposed to be an easy way to make extra money, right? I had done it countless times before and never had any issues. When I saw the CRAIGSLIST ad for a babysitter needed in an upscale neighborhood, I didn't think twice. The pay was good and the family seemed nice. I had no idea that this seemingly perfect job would turn into the most terrifying night of my life. The house was located in a quiet, affluent neighborhood. Large trees lined the streets, and the houses were all neatly kept with perfectly manicured lawns. It was late afternoon when I arrived, the sky painted with the warm hues of the setting sun. The house itself was impressive, a large two-story with a wraparound porch and huge windows that gleamed in the fading light. I knocked on the door, and a woman in her mid-30s opened it with a warm smile. "You must be Lisa," she said. "I'm Mrs. Clark. Please come in." She led me inside, and I was struck by the elegance of the interior. The furnishings were modern and tasteful, and everything was impeccably clean. Mrs. Clark introduced me to her husband and their two children, Timmy and Sarah, who were 5 and 8 years old. The kids were polite, but unusually quiet, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Mrs. Clark gave me a quick tour of the house and showed me where the emergency numbers were. She and her husband were going to a charity event and would be back late. As they left, Mrs. Clark gave me a reassuring smile. "The kids usually go to bed around 8. They're very well behaved. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call us." Once they were gone, I tried to make the kids comfortable. We played a few games, but their behavior was unsettling. They followed instructions perfectly, their faces blank and emotionless. After dinner, I tucked them into bed and settled down in the living room to watch some TV. It was around 9 p.m. when things started to feel off. I heard a soft thud from upstairs. Thinking it was the kids, I went up to check on them, but they were both sound asleep. As I was heading back down, I noticed one of the family photos on the hallway wall had tilted slightly. I straightened it and shrugged off the feeling of unease. Back downstairs, I tried to focus on the TV, but my mind kept drifting. The house was too quiet. Every creak and groan of the old house made my nerves jangle. I decided to make myself a cup of tea to calm down. As I stood in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil, I heard it again. A soft, rhythmic thudding sound. This time, it was coming from the basement. My heart raced as I approached the basement door. I hesitated, every horror movie I'd ever seen flashing through my mind. But I was overtaken by curiosity, and I slowly opened the door. The basement was dark, the light switch just inside the door. I flicked it on, and a single bare bulb illuminated the space, casting long shadows on the walls. The sound was louder now, a steady thud-thud-thud coming from the far corner of the room. I took a deep breath and descended the stairs. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and boxes. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew was strong. As I made my way toward the sound, I noticed a small door set into the wall, almost hidden behind a stack of boxes. The sound was coming from behind it. I reached for the door, my hand trembling. I pulled it open to reveal a tiny, cramped room, barely larger than a closet. Inside, there was a strange old doll, its face cracked and eyes unnervingly lifelike. It was propped up against the wall, and with each sway of the house, it thudded against the wood. My heart was pounding. I quickly closed the door and backed away, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I hurried back upstairs, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. Back in the living room, I tried to convince myself it was just a creepy old toy, nothing more, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Every shadow seemed to move, and the house felt alive with unseen eyes. I decided to call the Clarks, but there was no answer. I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady. Suddenly, I heard footsteps overhead, slow and deliberate. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and crept up the stairs. The hallway was dark, and the only light came from the kids' nightlight at the end. The footsteps stopped as I reached the top of the stairs. I checked on the kids first. They were still asleep, their faces peaceful. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I stepped out of their room, I noticed the attic hatch in the ceiling was slightly ajar. The ladder was down, and a cold draft blew down from the opening. My pulse quickened. I climbed the ladder, the candlestick held tightly in my hand. The attic was dark, and I fumbled for the light switch. When the light flickered on, I gasped. The attic was filled with old, dusty boxes, but what caught my eye was a large, old trunk, there in the center of the attic. I hesitated, but something compelled me to open it. Inside, I found old clothes, toys, and a journal. The journal belonged to Mrs. Clark, detailing strange occurrences just like the ones I had experienced. The final entry was hastily written, describing how she had seen something in the house, something not human. My heart raced as I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a figure standing in the shadows, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. I froze, unable to move or scream. The figure took a step forward, and I bolted down the ladder, slamming the hatch shut behind me. I ran to the kids' room and locked the door, my mind racing. I needed to get us out of there. I shook Timmy and Sarah awake, whispering urgently that we needed to leave. They were groggy but compliant, and we hurried downstairs. The house seemed to groan and shift around us, and I felt those unseen eyes watching our every move. We reached the front door just as the Clarks pulled into the driveway. I ran out to them, babbling incoherently about the attic and the figure. The police were called, and they searched the house, but they found nothing. The attic was just as cluttered as I had left it, but there was no sign of the figure I had seen. The Clarks were shaken, and they assured me that they would have the house thoroughly checked. I never went back, and I never took another babysitting job. The experience left me haunted by the unknown, by the feeling of being watched and the image of the figure. I still wonder what I saw that night, and if it's still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting babysitter. Babysitting can seem like an easy job, but you never really know what you're walking into. If these stories made your skin crawl, remember to hit that like button and share the chills with your friends. Subscribe for more terrifying tales, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment of horror. Stay safe and keep watching for more spine-tingling stories. See you in the next nightmare.